Welcome to our series, Questions and Answers for a World in Crisis. Today, through the words of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, we will learn the true meaning and use of wealth. The Mother. Money is not meant to make money. Money is meant to make the earth ready for the advent of the new creation. A day shall come when all the wealth of this world, freed at last from the enslavement to the anti-divine forces, offers itself spontaneously and fully to the service of the divine's work upon earth. 6th January 1955. There's a footnote about this message. It was distributed on the Feast of the Epiphany, which the Mother designated as the festival of the offering of the material world to the divine. You are richer with the wealth you give than with the wealth you keep in your possession. True wealth is that which one offers to the divine. You are rich only by the money that you give to the divine cause. 30th January 1959. The true fortune is to spend in the right way. You become truly rich when you dispose of your wealth in the best possible way. February 1962. Therefore, it was like this, you see. This letter was written to someone who wanted to go out from here and to collect money for Sri Aurobindo's work. And this person had no means at all. So he began by saying to Sri Aurobindo, "But as I myself have no means, people will have no trust in me, and I won't be able to get anything." And Sri Aurobindo answered him something like this, that it is not the external force in its most material form which is necessary. It is the handling of the inner force which gives one control over money wherever it is. Whether it is in public institutions or with individuals, one obtains control over it, and one can, when it is necessary, attract by a certain movement what is needed. Question. How can one know if one's way of using money is in accordance with the divine will? Mother. One must first know what the divine will is. But there is a surer way to surrender money for the divine work. If one is not sure oneself, divinely means at the service of the divine. It means not to use money for one's own satisfaction, but to place it at the divine service. When you are rich and have a lot of money to spend, generally you spend it on things you find pleasant, and you become habituated to these things, attached to these things. And if one day the money is gone, you miss it. You are unhappy, you are miserable, and feel all lost because you no longer have what you were in the habit of having. It is a bondage, a weak attachment. He who is quite detached, when he lives in the midst of these things, it is well with him. When these things are gone, it is well also. He is totally indifferent to both. That is the right attitude. When it is there, he uses it. When it is not, he does without it. And for his inner consciousness, this makes no difference. That surprises you, but it is like that. There are people who have the power of attracting money, and they haven't the least need to practice dishonesty to get it. Others, even to get a few pennies, must make all sorts of contrivances, more or less clean, so one cannot say. We see a rich man and think he must be exercising a control over the forces of money. No, not necessarily. But if a man remains perfectly honest and does what he thinks is his duty, without caring to acquire money, and yet money comes to him, evidently he has a certain affinity with those forces. Sri Aurobindo has answered this question. He says that money in itself is an impersonal force. The way in which you acquire money concerns you alone personally. It may do you great harm. It may harm others also. But it does not in any way change the nature of the money, which is an altogether impersonal force. Money has no color, no taste, no psychological consciousness. It is a force. It is like saying that the air breathed out by a scoundrel is more tainted than that breathed out by an honest man. I don't think so. I think the result is the same. Give all you are, all you have. Nothing more is asked of you, but also nothing less. 6th January, 1956. Parentheses after a silence. You see, when one thinks of money, one thinks of banknotes or coins or some kind of wealth, some precious things. But this is only the physical expression of a force which may be handled by the vital and which, when possessed and controlled, almost automatically brings along these more material expressions of money. And that is a kind of power. Silence. It is a power of attracting certain very material vibrations, which has a capacity for utilization that increases its strength, which is like the action of physical exercise. You see, it increases its strength through utilization. For example, if you have a control over this force, it is a force which, in the vital world, has a color varying between red, a dark, extremely strong red, and a deep gold that's neither bright nor very pale. Well, this force, when it is made to move, to circulate, its strength increases. It is not something one can accumulate and keep without using. It is a force which must always be circulated. For example, people who are misers and accumulate all the money, all the wealth they can attract towards themselves. Put this force aside without using its power of movement. And either it escapes or it lies benumbed and loses its strength. The true method of being in the stream of this money power is precisely what is written here: a sea of absolute impersonality, the feeling that it is not something you possess or which belongs to you, but that it is a force you can handle and direct where it ought to go in order to do the most useful work. And by these movements, by this constant action, the power increases, the power of attraction, a certain power of organization also. That is to say, even somebody who has no physical means, who is not in those material circumstances where he could materially handle money, if he is in possession of this force, he can make it act, make it circulate, and if ever he finds it necessary, receives from it as much power as he needs without there being externally any sign or reason why the money should come to him. He may be in conditions which are absolutely the very opposite of those of usual wealth, and yet can handle this force and always have at his disposal all the wealth that's necessary to carry on his work. Sri Aurobindo, from the Mother. Money is the visible sign of a universal force, and this force, in its manifestation on earth, works on the vital and physical planes and is indispensable to the fullness of the outer life. In its origin and its true action, it belongs to the divine. But like other powers of the divine, it is delegated here, and in the ignorance of the lower nature can be usurped for the uses of the ego, or held by Asuric influences and perverted to their purpose. This is indeed one of the three forces, power, wealth, sex, that have the strongest attraction for the human ego and the asura, and are most generally misheld and misused by those who retain them. For this reason, most spiritual disciplines proclaim poverty and bareness of life as the only spiritual condition. But this is an error. It leaves the power in the hands of the hostile forces. To reconquer it for the divine to whom it belongs, and use it divinely for the divine life, is the supramental way for the sadhaka.